Hi all, this is the full interview with Cris Blyth from Team 17. He made the animated intro and cutscenes for Worms. This interview was conducted way back in July 2022 for my recent video, The Making of Worms, which is linked below. A link to Chris's YouTube channel was also below if you'd like to see what he's been up to. Here we chat about Team 17 and Worms of course, but also the Amiga, his time at James Cameron's Digital Domain, and all sorts in between. As usual, I've cut off some chit chat before and after the interview, so we'll jump right in. Where did your interest in computers actually start?
Oh, that goes way back. My dad brought from college over summertime a Commodore PET. And I'd been into doing electronics and stuff like that before. And I liked electronics back then. And I had a whole kit and the whole thing. But as soon as my dad brought the Commodore PET home, I was like, wait, I have full control over this. You can make programs, and I followed all this stuff. And that's what really got me into it. And I was, doing basic, like even animating ASCII art. And then I found out you could look into, you could peek into the registers of the character sets. And I saw one of the first programs where you could, change the characters and all that kind of stuff. And it was really, that was really what it was of understanding at that point of programming was, that was my first in, even though, I went on and did programming later, that clearly that's not what I ended up doing. But yeah, Commodore PET, that's what it was. And then my dad then had to give that back to the college, although he did bring it back and forward, and he realized that I could get into and program things that he was, not aware of. And then I got a VIC-20. Then that was it. And then VIC-20, I started doing proper programming on. Then I got a 16K RAM pack, and I had a different walk back then because I could walk around with the walk of, I'm a guy with a 16K RAM pack. I had a different things like, hey, and he's the guy. He's got a 16K RAM pack. It's kind of amazing. And then I got this super, what it was, I can't remember, super expander for doing graphics, a graphic expander cartridge, and it allowed you to draw and do all this kind of stuff. And that's when I realized that the slant from me was on the artistic side. And then I remember getting an Atari, and I got an Atari like touch tablet where I could draw. And then that was like, oh, wait a minute. And my dad at the time was into really high-end computer graphics terminals called Chromatics and Chromemco machines. And he was using that for textile design way back, way early on. And he came out to California for kind of like doing research to talk to a bunch of different people on what they're doing. And the program that he actually then worked with at the Scottish College of Textiles, ScotWeave, is still available. You can still buy it. And it's been, kept on going forward for decades now. So he was into that for a specific reason, but he really understood the direction of where computers were going to go, and it didn't take much for him to kind of shove me along. I really took it and went with it, and then started even doing like machine code stuff and everything like that. It was really that. But my dad started the ball rolling, as it were.
Mm. So did you move on to Amiga before joining Team 17?
No, I got the Amiga way before, and I was using it for graphics and using it for a lot of gaming as well. And then we got, I imagine, getting Imagine, and then Real 3D, and Imagine was amazing. Turbo Silver, there was all those different ones back then, and they're all super limited. But then you managed to do some cool stuff. And then I remember seeing in the Amiga magazines when they were using the video toaster, and all the amazingly polished and well done advertising that they had back then, that had the toaster and they had Lightwave and all this kind of stuff. And that was like it felt like that was part of the over there in America land, they have these things and we would never get them. And but then at that point, then I was really I was working, actually I went back to doing electronics. I got a job as a kind of installation and field service engineer for these huge industrial machines that had a lot of electronics in them. And I'd go, and the opportunity is like, hey, you get to travel and go. I'm like, I'm in. I don't care. Am I pulling carts? What am I doing? Am I digging ditches? But it was a full kind of electronics, going to different countries, installing these different things. And that was actually how I made my first connection to Team 17 through Marcus Dyson. And it was quite a story as well. So I was, my first email that I sent, I was literally in a quandary. I'd got a bunch of money together to buy an Amiga 4000. But at the time, and this is when I was working abroad, before then, I'd had an Amiga 500, and I'd literally take the Amiga 500 with me to different hotels around the world, and I'd plug it into the TV, and I'd work on 3D, right? And I'd even leave it rendering. And then, you know, it was amazing. I literally take this thing around with me, and it kind of, one of them, I had two, and one that I kept at home, and I had another Amiga 500 Plus that I kept, that's right, that I kept with me. And I learned a lot with that. But it was at this point where I'm like, I want to do more video. I want to have one of these recorders and do all this stuff. But at that point, when I was really looking at, like, the Amiga 4000 was amazing, two things were kind of happening side by side. At the same time, I remember seeing these PCs, these Pentiums, and it was like, you could get all this stuff, or you could get the Amiga 4000 for the same price. But you seem to be the, you know, they used to do those images, these advertising images, showing all the different things you would get with it. You know, come with a dog, you get a free dog anyway. And then you get the Amiga 4000. And so at that point, then I literally emailed Marcus Dyson and and I went, I'm in a quandary. What do I do? Right. And I was in the Philippines, and I was about to leave to come back to the States. And I wanted to order through the phone. If you remember, you do that. You could order over the phone, and it would get delivered. And I knew that by the time I'd get there, I would, you know, blah, 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 get my timing right. And anyhow, then I realized that I was in the Philippines, and I thought, wait a minute, don't they make Amigas here? And I found out where the factory was. And then I went down there with a camera, and I got there by a taxi, and the taxi guy hung out, and it was closed. And I was like, something is up here. This is and you could see it. It was empty. It was closed. And this is when Amiga were going through some sort of challenge. And I think that factory opened and closed a few times. They had issues going on there. And that's when I thought, hey, I could contact Amiga Format. And at this point, I'd left a message with Marcus as well. I'd called and left a message. And then I'd emailed him and done a couple of things. And but I never really heard back from him. But during all of this time, I'd seen that Marcus had this affinity with Team 17 because of where he came from. He came from West Yorkshire. And so basically, I was in a situation where I had this kind of story idea of, hey, I've got a story. This Amiga thing is all weird over here. I don't know what's going on. And then I kind of called out to them, said, hey, could I do this story? But then, so when I called up Amiga Format again, and they literally said, and during this time, this is when I was trying to figure out if I should buy an Amiga or not, right? And I said, I'm just going to call them, right? And I called them, and the girl said, oh, Marcus doesn't work here anymore. I'm like, what? Yeah, he doesn't. I'm like, oh, okay. Do you know where do you know? And she went, no, I don't know where he's gone. And then I literally took a leap of faith, and I went, I'm going to call Team 17. And I literally bluffed it. I called. I went, is Marcus Dyson there? And she went, yes, he's just coming in through the door. And I was like, yes. And so he went, hello? I went, hey, it's Cris. I'm in the Philippines. He went, wait, dude, you're the person that emailed me. How do you know? How did you know? How did you find me? I went, I put two and two. He goes, no one knows I'm here. I left under the cover of night from Future Publishing or something like that. And then, and he goes, how did you know? And then anyway, I said, well, you know, blah, blah, blah. And we talked about a bunch of different stuff. And he goes, I've literally just walked into the door. I have to go and meet people and do the thing. And he was just starting his work there. And so he said, hey, I'm having a party. Do you want to come to it? I'm like, yes. And so basically I flew back to the UK. And then literally on that same day, I was totally jet lagged. There was a knock on the door. And oh, by the way, he convinced me to get the Amiga. And my Amiga arrived on the same day. And I literally like was completely, jet lagged. They were knocking on the door. My Amiga arrived. I then went back to sleep. And then on that same day, I realized, it was a Saturday or something. I had to drive down for this party. And then I drove down and then met everyone at Team 17. And that's when I met John Allardyce. And John Allardyce was, the guy doing all the intros and everything. And he's always been known for doing great camera work and really doing some thinking outside the box and doing some huge scenes where everyone's like doing small things. He was doing these massive scenes, which were amazing on the Tower Salt stuff. And I became friendly with them then. And that's when he's like, I just started going down and hanging out. And he was actually working up in Edinburgh. And so I hung out with him up in Edinburgh and we got very friendly. And then he then gave me a copy of Lightrave, which was the hack of Lightwave to get it running on Amiga 4000. And then I did a few things on the proper version of Lightwave and then sent them to them. And they're like, hey, we could maybe use you. And so I started doing more and more stuff. And then it just didn't happen. They were trying to get this contract through Virgin, I think. And it just wasn't happening and things were taking too long. And I actually was on the verge of accepting a new contract, a new role that would take me down to London. And I was literally waiting for the Team 17 thing to start happening. It sounded like it was going to happen. And by the way, I'd gone down there. I'd kind of helped out on doing some tiny little bits and pieces, doing voices and stuff for the Tower Salt intro. And that was just because I was just hanging around. And people were like, "Oh, do you work here? What do you do?" And I'm like, "No, I don't. I do Lightwave. I do 3D." And I showed them some of the stuff. And so people started to get to know me. And they're like, "Oh, you'd kind of fit in here." And at that point, they weren't in the main building in Ossett. They were in the building before. And it was this total ragtag team of people. And it was at that point then, when at that point I was saying I'd still program and stuff like that. And then I saw what they were programming. And I just shut up. I'm like, I do graphics. I do 3D. I didn't even mention I did any because compared to these guys, it was just different. So I was down in London and I was literally going for this interview. Well, it wasn't an interview. It's like a formal interview of, okay, you're coming over with us. This is this new job. You're going to be based in London, blah, 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 blah. And I literally got a page on my pager from Martin Brown. And it said, and it was, I remember it was a Philips pager and it was 4 lines. It was very posh at that time. And I got a call, literally, I'm about to sign. And I got a call from Martin, a page from Martin, and it said, "We're on." And I was like, I said to my boss that was interviewing me in this it's a foregone conclusion interview. I went, "Oh, I have to take this." And he goes, "Oh, good. Yeah, you take this." And I had a phone, of course. And I didn't kind of let it on, but basically I made it sound like I was talking to a client. And I went, "Sure." And so basically I called him and went, "Hey," and he goes, "How quickly can get it? It's on. We're doing it. We want you to be coming and working on Worms." I'm like, "When do you need me there for?" I'm being total, and he went, "Monday." I'm like, "Okay, I'll be there." And I went and I hung up. We didn't agree or negotiate anything at all. I just went, "I'm doing this." And it was a totally different departure from doing my proper engineering job, electronics engineering job. And I was really good with my clients. I had a whole bunch of clients that really liked me. And, they'd sometimes specifically ask for me to go to China or go to wherever. And, but anyhow, I said to my boss, I said, "I'm going to not take this job." And he went, so, "What?" "Yeah, I've actually had a different job offer. Thank you." And he went, and he couldn't believe that I was giving up this really solid, very well-paid job. And at that time, they'd keep you out of the country for more than 11 months so you didn't pay taxes, right? Wow. You'd literally, if I was coming back, I'd say, "Hey, can I just go to France for like a week?" And then I'm up to my quota and like, "Yeah, sure, we'll set up a service appointment." So you come from the Philippines or India or wherever you are, we'll fly to Paris or go to Lyon. It was Lyon we're in, and we'll go there, and then that'll put you over the balance, and then so it was really well-paying job to go to a games company that at that point was for kids, and I was making basically what my dad was kind of, he got it, but to make other people understand, he's like, "Well, he he makes cartoons, which doesn't sound as good as, oh, he's an RF field service engineer for a huge company, and he goes and works on these multi-million-dollar machines. You know, it sounds very different. But anyhow, I left, and then I literally arrived at Team 17, and then we were off to the races. John had already started on a bunch of the stuff for the original Worms, and had built the character. And he said modeling wasn't his strong point. We had kind of already got set up. We had a whole bunch of problems with like literally how little memory we had. And then we started coming up with new ideas, and we storyboarded them all out, and then that was that. I don't know if that answers the question, because I forgot what the question was.
No, yes, it does answer it. Yeah. So at what kind of stage was the game at when you joined? Then I know you're saying that you started storyboarding the animations.
That was so. It was really, it was Marcus Dyson, it was John Allardyce, and Martin Brown, who kind of championed me to come on. And at that point, then I believe it was still called Total Wormage. And then Marcus kind of, I guess, took over the branding and the look and everything. Because I remember he came to me and said, "Hey, can you render me that grenade on its own?" I'm like, "Sure, here." And then I didn't know. He showed me where it was going to kind of be, and then that became the look, And but the game was really in a good place. And when I started, they were pulling on a whole bunch of other people to do all the conversions, which at that point were total rewrites, I believe. There was a whole bunch of the code base that was just like, there's no way to transfer it. And the bunch that Andy Davidson had done, who I'm still in contact with, Andy Davidson had done he started that in Blitz Basic, I think, and then he did a bunch of machine code in 68000. And then, there was conversions to Game Boy, there was conversions to, there was like 15 platforms at once. I remember when you had the PC floppy and PC CD-ROM versions, they were very similar, but the fact that those were seen as two things at the time, because there were still games being delivered on floppy disk. Wow. And so I think there was 15 platforms at once. There was a lot of these people that were working off-site, and then we had a whole bunch of new people that were brought in that weren't Team 17 people, that kind of brought in to do the conversions. And so I would say when I came in, it was being turned, it was at that moment of, it's now called Worms, and the game itself, Andy had really, it was, here's the worm, here's the game, and then everyone else is kind of copying it from that, So it was in a really good place. I think and then the game got released, and then we started doing the add-on packs and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, I was brought in to really work on the cinematic intros. And we had other ones that we had that were really good fun as well, that we never got to do. We had way more ideas than we had time for, and but then we ended up doing all the sound effects and then editing all that together. And doing all the editing back then, man, was not easy. Even having the systems to do on the box editing was like a deal, And then I was asked to then do some of the voices. So everyone did everything. It was amazing back then, is that we were allowed to kind of do we were allowed to kind of do a lot. There was no one would stop you. In fact, that it was Bjorn Lind that they would say, "Hey, you can you do different voices? Can you do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And we just went in and did it, and then it became, "Hey, we've got all these extra voices now." And now it's really funny if you look at all the different packs that are on there. Like Soul Man was one of the ones I did. I did Angry Scots, of course, but Soul Man was one, and it's kind of still got a lot of the same things in there that I did way back then.
Wow.
And they used my voices on quite a lot of them until they redid them in higher fidelity. I think 2000, I can't remember actually, but in later versions. But I was quite surprised that they used my voice for so many versions after that. But yeah, you got to do a lot of different things. And we weren't just doing Worms at that point. We were doing a different game. John was working on the filming of this other game called Allegiance, which had the potential to be really, really good. We had a lot of different games in development, and then again, it was a really young company, and so they were making a lot of mistakes, because that's, of course, we were crossing, breaking new ground on a lot of different things, and a lot of it was like, we're trying things and see if they stick on the wall or not, and some of them were mistakes, and some of them weren't mistakes, and some of them were cancelled that shouldn't have been cancelled, and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's all par for the course, and it's easy to look at it now and go, oh, we should have done this and done that. But at the time, it was, even the fact that we were doing Worms when everyone was doing, getting into 3D with, what were they called? The 3D effects cards and all that kind of stuff. We were pushing against already. And the fact is that when you could do at that point, then the polygonal resolution and the aliasing of the UV mapping and everything back then was so bad that it was better. We were looking at it. We had a lot of 2D, real amazing 2D masters like Simon Butler and stuff like that were amazing doing 2D work, that of all the different angles that they were doing, some of them were really limited. I remember seeing this little like bike racing game or something, and there was so little polygonal value going on. It just looked like noise. If you squished up your eyes, it would kind of look good. But the amount of options that we're getting, at that point, I remember, I think it was Simon that said, you could just draw all of these really well. And for the different angles that you're getting, it was 3D, but it wasn't like you're going around it. It was just like banking left and right, but you weren't getting on the benefit. But because it was 3D, that was the way everything was going. And we were going against the grind anyway, doing 2D, but having these great 3D, animated intros, Even then, there was not many people doing animated intros to that style. I remember people kind of going, is this what we're supposed to be doing? Should we do this? And of course, now you look at it and go, yeah, of course. It makes sense now. Now a thing.
I was watching all of them the other day, and they actually look incredible for 1995,
It was really, I mean, we were, when we were rendering, so we had this thing. John had a good relationship with a bunch of the guys in Foundation Imaging, because that's where he eventually went. And which led to everything else, which was quite funny. We had this thing called it was going to be called the Screamer, which was going to be a new tech developed NT box with two NT workstations in the box that would communicate with each other and a network card and everything. And then it turned into this thing called the Raptor. I think the Raptor was made by someone else, and it was, again, a big, large, expensive box. And I think we got the second one in the country. I think Andy Bishop from AMG had the first one. And it was basically two boards with two processors, two 6800 ARM processors or something, MIPS processors. Can't remember. And it was two motherboards were in there, each with two chips on them. And would basically send renders to it from the Amiga. It had no keyboard, it had no monitor. You basically, in Lightwave, you go to the networking panel and you click the button and it would not appear. You click it again and one would appear. You'd wait, you click it again and you look at it and you'd have a cup of coffee and you click it and then doom, all four would appear, or 12 little instances would appear, like, it's talking to it. And then we'd load up a scene and then send the scene to it, and like downloading, and then it would render so fast, it was bananas. So that's how we got all our renders done. If it wasn't for that Raptor, we'd be screwed. And I remember when John was really pushing for that Raptor to be boxed, like a hard push. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have done it. We wouldn't have been able to get anything done. So that was a pioneering spirit from John that really pushed that forward. And I kind of arrived, it was already there. I didn't do any of that. That was all John.
So it's a far cry from leaving your Amiga 500 rendering in a hotel room.
Yeah. I mean, it was incredible. And then, what it would allow us to do is try things out. We'd do some animation and you'd see it on the Amiga, and then, but you could try things out, but because the rendering and the software that you'd run to allow it to talk to the Raptor would take a 1.5 megabytes, your amount of memory that you had to render on and then send to that machine. We got it to we found the exact number of the exact bytes that you could send before it would crash. And what would happen, it would come back with things missing from the scene. You would literally have eyeballs missing. And it was like, shit, we're like a kilobyte over. We're like, okay, hang on. If I decimate these eyeballs and I remove the back polygons and I do this, blah, 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 and it's like, we're under, it's working. It was like, it reminded me of Apollo 13 when they were trying to restart it with using less amps and doing all this stuff. It was basically like that. Like we got it under that level, that meter, this amperage level of like, oh, we're just under. Okay, we're good. And then we wrote down that number on a piece of paper and stuck it onto the machine, I think, or something, you know, and it was like, as long as your scene before you sent it was under that number, you knew to render. So it was amazing. And having that machine allowed us to, you know, you'd see it in wireframe, but sometimes, and this is what was cool, is that even on the Amiga 4000 that we're on, it was sometimes quicker to send it and render it than wait for it to be wireframed and come back. So that's the kind of freedom, and it's filled in, even though you could put it to low resolution. So that's what we do low resolution. We just put it to like a lower res in the thing, and then send it off, and then it would come back, and then you play it on your on the PDF, on the perception card, and it was just magic. That whole setup was just amazing.
Wow. I think that, you know, especially for very young people today, for them to get their heads around just how limited in terms of memory and stuff the hardware was in those days is difficult. Yeah. You know,
yeah, you couldn't even like do parenting. So when we had something that was being handed from one hand to another, that was a massive amount of like, okay, we literally have to draw it out and go, how the hell are we going to do this? You know? And we had all these funny little plugins that we'd get, and all the new plugins would come in and break things. And then there were certain plugins that we couldn't use because they wouldn't go down to the NT workstations, you know? So they were running LWSN. So there was anything that was funny, it wouldn't work, you know? So we had to be really careful on the plugins that we'd even load, you know? And I remember we had one that was in Worms 2. We had dynamic parenting, and it was like, oh, you could go like this, you know. I mean, it's so simple now, but in the day, that was just a, you know, a new world. And again, you know, Worms 2 was dramatically different from Worms 1 because it allowed us to stop and then really look at, you know, we at that point then, I can't remember if we changed over to, if we're still on the Amigas or on the PCs at that point. I believe. Yeah, I think for Worms 2, yeah, for Worms 2, I believe we were on the Amiga 4000 still, although it's really vague now. I'd have to ask Perry Fractic, because he has he has a drive image of that from my old Amiga. He might know, and he actually took some of the old scenes and got them re-rendered. But anyway, yeah. So Worms 2. John went on to do Allegiance and was working on a bunch of other stuff. And then I got a kind of clean slate to start with Worms 2 and redesign the character and have it more kind of cell shaded. And that was the new thing back then. We had these new cell shading tools in Lightwave that were just great. And then we had this thing called Sock Puppet or something that allowed us to basically have smaller sections that we can move around and wrap around. And then from that, you'd meta something. All the Lightwave stuff had meta this and weird scaling on that it didn't take on the industry norms, and that's why I think it actually hurt it, because there was subdivision surfaces that was being used, but they called it meta shit. I don't know, they called it meta something or other, and therefore it didn't have the same. It didn't have it because it didn't have the same name, you know. So even though we had things that were in Lightwave years before a lot of other people, we never got the credit for it, and it was always kind of poo-pooed in that kind of way. But Worms 2 did give us that opportunity to really have a lot more. I think we had a lot more memory at that point then too, because we got bigger. We got updates in that too. I have to really look at that. It might be that for Worms 2, we might have been on PCs. In fact, I think we were. We might have been on the early box machines, or I remember mine was white with a black bit in the middle. I'd have to look through some of my older pictures, but yeah, it might have been that we had that were on PC versions of Lightwave. And then, oh yeah, and then from there we weren't using the Raptor. We actually started to build a little farm of machines that would send it to, and then even our own workstations at night would go we'd set them up so we could render. See that? Yeah, I remember we had like a few machines put aside that were for rendering too.
So whenever it happened, when you did transition to PC, you were still using the same software, were you?
Yeah, we were still using, but what we noticed is that there was a whole bunch of other art software. There was a bunch of great software on the Amiga that really didn't translate at that point. There was Photoshop, but there was no the good pixel pushing stuff that we used, and then also there was just a lot of plugins and stuff that worked. And even the PC version of Lightwave at the time, there was stuff that was. I remember doing this test of I loaded stuff into my Amiga 4000, and it was rendering faster than my PC. And then that's when we got my PC and was like, okay, let's render. And I was like, oh, I don't have I don't have a Raptor to render to. And then it's like, oh, by the way, Martin, we need to buy more machines now because we need to now have something to render onto. Blah, blah, blah. And so there was several steps back. And so I continued to use my Amiga for a lot of things. And then on top of that, we had this program that allowed us to have one mouse that would go between the Amigas and the PCs. And I've still got it. And keep on forgetting what it's called. It's got the name of something. It's called Transformer or something like that. And it still works between Mac and PC. And we had that working between PCs and Amigas. And it was yeah. So we kept on using the Amiga 4000s forever. And then when I went to the States, of course, I took mine to the States. There was a lot of people back then that I talked to a lot of Amiga owners, and they were like, I said, oh, do you still have yours? And they said, oh yeah, I'm not going to get rid of it. It's like it'd be bad luck. They owe their careers to using their Amiga. And for a lot of people that I know for using Lightwave, it's very, very much now, even more so. I've got my little Amiga 500 Mini in front of me here. It's when you start playing around with it, you realize this was the early 90s. Good God, we had it good and we didn't know it, Also, as well, it was a lot more intimate relationship to my startup sequence. The libraries and the devs and all the stuff that was there was so kind of, for me, logical that it was approachable to hack into and make your own thing. And if something, the great thing that we'd always have is our RAM disk. It's like, I'll just copy into RAM disk. Something happens, I switch off my machine. I'm going to copy everything. I'm going to extract it there. I'm going to work on it there. And I'm going to make mistakes. And then if something doesn't work, I'll just reset. And I think there was there was a comfort there of my Amiga was I really felt like there was times it was like wanting to crash, and it was holding on. I was like, please just hold on for just a bit longer. And I literally felt like it was going to crash, and it was really going slow. And it was like, I could feel it going, I got you. I'll hold on for a bit longer, and then I get something done. And our thing was save and save often. And I remember me and John were really tired. We were working through the night. Oh, and by the way, John Allardyce introduced me to coffee. I never drank coffee until and I was working, and I was like really tired. And he went away and he came back. He goes, here. And I was like, oh, I am a normal person. I drink coffee like a person. I was like, this is really strong. And it became my friend. And he actually said that. He said, this will become your friend. Yes, it did become my friend. And we were working so late, and we were so tired that we're literally not talking properly. I remember there was a part that we both said, save skeen. We didn't say scene. We said save skeen. At the same time, we looked at each other and went, oh, we need to sleep. When we were in sync at that point, we were working really well. We'd know we'd both working away. And we both said the same speech, like wrong thing almost at the same time. We're like, and so that's, whenever anyone would walk in the door, we'd say, skave skeen, we'd say that just like, oh yeah, we better, And years later, when, I was working at Digital Domain is a friend of mine called Greg Teagarden, who would work for days on Lightwave and not save, because saving would take time, and sometimes it weirdly can cause issues. So he wouldn't save for days, and then something would happen, and then he'd realized he hadn't saved, and it's called pulling a tea garden. Now everyone said, oh, he's pulling a tea garden, which means not saving. And so we really, back in the day when we were working on Lightwave, it was really robust. There was when you knew if you're working on a plugin, it's like, oh, I'm going to save objects, I'm going to save everything, I'm going to save scene, save objects, save tech, save everything, because but the actual, it's really weird. We'd have so many programs running behind each other, and that whole system of pulling down the screens and revealing the other one. Man, it was really weird. If you look at Mac now, or even a phone, you can look at an iPhone. Sometimes if I'm trying to get something from one, if I can't copy something from one screen to another, I'll sometimes, when you do the whole thing, if you hold it up and slide across to look at what's on the other screen, you'd do that on the Amiga. You'd pull it down and you'd see what was down there, and you'd have it up. So if there's any information that you need to go between them, you would be able to look at it. And that whole stacking thing, man, it was so simple. I'll just pull this down and the thing was behind it. I mean, we don't have that in the same way. I think one of the things that we, as we get older, we have a lot more windows up on the screen. And I'm realizing as I get older, I'm fundamentally we're not designed for that. In the same way that when you go to YouTube to look at that thing that you're supposed to be looking up, but you don't, because you get confronted with 50 other things. You go, oh, that's interesting. And then 10 minutes later, you're like, wait, why was I here again? I'm looking at videos of somebody taking something apart and welding something. It's like, I came here for something totally different. We get all this stuff coming at us. And I think we have all these windows right now. You don't want to see my desktop. I got all this stuff coming up. But in that way, that even when people would work on Amiga, you'd have your workbench, but all your other screens were full screen and you'd pull them down. And I think there was a simplicity in that, like, when I'm working on this, I'm working on this. And then when I change, I'm working on that. And I think the way the software and even the whole ecosystem worked made you a better multitasker. Now I feel I'm a worse multitasker.
Interesting.
And I don't know if you can see my black Amiga 1200 behind me there.
I can.
Beautiful. That was painted by Rory McLeish. We took an Amiga 1200 and I got a CD-TV keyboard that there was a dead CD-TV, and I literally was like, does no one want this? And like, no, take that piece of crap. I'm like, I have an idea. And so, yeah, so Rory sprayed it, and he's an amazing artist, Rory McLeish, both practical, doing model building and doing then the same models in CG. Amazing. He came out and worked at Digital Domain for a long time, worked on some amazing projects. He now teaches back in Harrogate. And so he painted that for me. And every time I look at it, and every time I touch it, I'm like, man, he did a good job on that. So we got a CD-TV keyboard, which plonked in perfectly, and got it going. And then I got an accelerator card. And also this one had the floppy drive and the hard drive, so it is heavy also, but man, it is. And so basically the reason why I had it out is Perifractic got worms on the new Amiga 500 and the new A500. And I've not been playing worms for a while, and I needed to basically have some practice. He was going to have me come up and would have we're going to do that at some point soon, have a little game of me playing worms against him, which would be fun. And I needed to get some practice in. But the biggest challenge for me was getting that connecting to a monitor, of all things. I found the discs. I found them, of course, downstairs. And does that even work?
Yeah.
Focusing? And of course, they just worked first time.
Mm-hmm.
My Amiga had been sitting, in a box, with the little silica gel all packed nicely, but I've not used it for a long, long time. Bring it, and you've heard these stories a million times. You bring it out, it's been Amatic for 400 years, and I switch it on, plug it in, it works. I get the floppy disk that was sitting in it, and it loads right up. I mean, I've not recapped it. I've not done anything. I've not even checked inside. It is just working totally fine. I love the fact that you can have that. Now, I don't know if you're aware of the story Amiga 4000 and the one from Digital Domain. Do you know about that one?
No.
So so years ago, so Digital Domain used a bunch of Amigas for video playback. And then also they tied it into their motion control system, which is called Cooper, the Cooper system. And then, so they basically used a combination of AREX, having then their own, they got the wrote programs, and then the Cooper software was professional software was on the Amiga. And it was the Amiga that would control the motion control rig on Apollo 13, on Titanic, whoa, right? And it would also record all the frames after it moved. And so you'd program in a move by moving it, right? And then you'd literally move it around and do the keyframes and everything. This is all Amiga. And then you'd set it off, and it would just then go, and it would record all the frames onto the PVR, right? All in one Amiga. Now, they would overheat like crazy. So they had holes drilled all over them, right? And so basically, as they moved to PCs, and they moved to PC version of Cooper, and then there was a time I was looking for a mouse, and there was an area where they kept older stuff and stuff from the stage. And then I was walking through there, and I saw a whole bunch of Amigas sitting there. I was like, and I didn't know at this time. This is, I realized after that, that's when I realized figured out the whole history. And I was like, what's that doing there? And then I was still an Amiga person. Here's the funny thing. When I moved to LA, I was like trying to be a visual effects person. And so I remember early on hearing somebody like making like kind of fun of the Amiga and all of that. So I kind of kept stum of like that history of where I came from, as it was really weird. I felt like, oh, I came from games. That's low down and like Amigas. Now I'm a proper person, and I work on PCs and Silicon graphics machines, and I'm doing stuff for commercials. And I didn't realize at the time I was surrounded by other Amiga people. And I'm realizing it now. Like I'm talking to people now that I'm realizing that somebody posted something like, I have no idea. And we're really, after doing the episodes with Perifractic, people are coming out of the woodwork going, I didn't know you're an Amiga person. I didn't know you did the worm stuff. So basically what happened is I saw this Amiga. I went, what are you going to do with this? And he goes, actually, we're going to be throwing these out. I'm like, what? I said, yeah, we're going to have to, destroy them actually. I'm like, no, you can't destroy them. Can you keep them? And he goes, no. I said, can I have it? And he went, no. I went, and so basically I said, could you not destroy it? And he goes, well, we're going to put them in the skip and they take them away. And I said, can you tell me when? And he goes, yeah, maybe. Right. And so he basically let me know. It's like, oh, the skip. I said, can you carefully put it in the trash? And he goes, yeah. And so he told me when it would be, and I went across and took out the skip, and it was just Amiga 4000. I was like, oh, I got in my car and I went home that night, and I didn't switch it on. Something else happened, and something else came up, and then other things happened, and I never switched it on. Now, during this other time, a friend of mine, Mike Massey was his name. He's a filmmaker now, I believe. He's like, I'm getting rid of all my Amiga stuff. And I'm like, I'll take it. And so he gave me like an Amiga 2000, an Amiga 3000, an Amiga 1000, another Amiga 2000 that was full to the brim of video toasters as well. And then the Amiga that I got from Digital Domain had everything in it. It had so many cards, and it was jam-packed full. And network cards, the whole thing. And but at that time in my life, I was busy in other things, and I literally put them in a storage compartment, which was a hassle to get to. And I kind of forgot about them until I moved and I bought a house, and I was like, oh man. And then I put them in storage boxes properly and put them into my shed. And then life got on. I had a son, and we had a whole house to rebuild, and the blah, blah, blah. And it was one of these, I'm going to get to this stage things, projects, right? And I never did. Then we moved to Kenya. And so we moved to Kenya and we built a studio over there, a TV production studio, teaching people and the whole thing. And then basically got to the stage of, we're going to be living in Kenya. We're going to sell our house. So we rented our house out to these renters. And then we basically sold it to a developer who allowed the renters to stay on, which is amazing because all of our stuff is in storage in these 3 sheds that we built in the back garden. And so we basically got rent free for years. And then at some point they're like, hey, we might be moving out. So, and then we're definitely living in Kenya now. So I said, okay, I'm going to come across and really thin out all of our stuff, which I did. And I gave away a whole bunch of stuff. And then it's like, I can't take these Amigas to the States. I need to give them to someone. And I decided to give them, I'm going to give them, so I found the Living Computer Museum and they were on and off. And then Paul Allen died or something. And then they were wanting to say, oh, we'll just take them. And I'm like, oh, so is it going to be on display? And they said, yeah, basically we'll have an Amiga 4000 and then it gets just kind of like worn out by kids bashing it. And then we just, throw that one away and we bring in a new one. We've got tons of them. I'm like, yeah, well, it wasn't that harsh, by the way, but it felt a bit like that. Yeah, when they die, we just kind of put them over there into the pile and then we put new ones in. I'm like, yeah, I don't kind of want that with my stuff. So I'd been seeing that there was a lot of cool people out there that were restoring things and looking after things and giving them new life. And I thought, and I found this guy, Perifractic, and I thought, it's such a shame he's in the UK.
So you've mentioned this guy a few times. Is he like someone who repairs
retro
stuff?
recipes? He's in a kind of Commodore 64, Amiga. He does a whole bunch of restoration of different machines.
Oh, on YouTube?
On YouTube.
Okay.
And so basically, I thought, it's such a shame because I can go out, I wish he was in the States because he'd be the right guy to give these machines to and then figure out a new life for them or do something with them. And at that point, I realized I'm not going to do the shelf with them all up there. I'm never going to have that. I'm not going to sell them. At that point, then the retro thing hadn't really kicked in. And so 2 Amiga 2000s, one with a Sunrise card in it for audio, another one with a full video toaster, an Amiga 3000, which was gorgeous, Amiga 1000 with the signatures, gorgeous machine with the original keys, the 2 different colored Amiga keys. My Amiga 4000, I had Amiga 600, which I'd tarted out, which was great. I used that machine because it was so cute. I put a hard drive in it, an accelerator in it, it weighed a ton. I had all these and I gave them. So basically, I realized that at that point, it's like, who am I going to give them to? And then Perifractic did this thing where he went up to the store. He was talking to this girl in the store. And it's like, she's American. Wait, he's in Walmart. What the heck? And so I watched his things a bit more and I realized he's in the States. So I literally found his phone number or something and I called him and I went, where are you? And he goes, oh, I'm about 40 minutes north of Los Angeles. I'm in Los Angeles. I said, hey, do you want all these things? And he's like, wait, you want to give them to me? I'm like, yeah, I've got all these things. I told him. He was like, I'll come now. And he drove down and I met him and we got these things out literally from my shed to his car. And I gave him an old Mac and my wife's first Mac, which is now his Mac that he uses in his thing. And all of these machines, it filled up his entire Prius that he had at the time to the brim of stuff. And we took pictures and we did the whole thing. And then we went about getting the Amiga, my old Amiga 4000 working and getting all the old Worms things going. And which he did. And then what he did was he archived my machine and put it onto the internet on the archive thing. And then that machine ended up in a museum. But then the Amiga 4000 from Digital Domain, I went up there and we're going to get that machine going. And we got it going, albeit I was an idiot because my Amiga 4000 was a 240 volt Amiga. And my Amiga 4000 from Digital Domain was 20 volt Amiga 4000. And we had a transformer. And I just took the kettle plug out the back and plugged it into the other one and powered it on and blew up the power supply of the Amiga 4000 from Digital Domain.
Ouch.
Ouch. But, and this is why the way that Amigas work, which is amazing. There's a ROM always, a base ROM that gives the Amiga all the instructions it needs. It's the truest plug and play that there ever was. Because Windows plug and play is not plug and play because you need a driver. It does not work out of the box with a card. Doesn't. Plug and play is a total lie on Windows from back then. It always has to load. So the driver was on the card on the Amiga. So we basically took the PVR boards out of the Amiga, the Titanic, that's what turned out to be the Titanic Amiga, the Digital Domain Amiga, and we plugged it into my Amiga and booted up, and it worked first time. We got the software working, the whole thing just worked first time. And what else? We plugged in other stuff as well, and we got it going. And that's when we realized, I thought this was from Apollo 13, because we found a picture of that Amiga, or one of them, but we can tell by the drilling patterns, it was that one. But I think he got in contact, somebody, Michael Kaffner, I think it was, got in contact and said, it wasn't that one. I drilled them all the same. I recognize that one as being another one from Apollo 13. So we thought it was Apollo 13. But then when we opened up the software for the PVR, we realized this is Titanic. This is Titanic stuff.
Wow.
So it was really quite an amazing moment. And I'm like, oh, are we going to be in trouble? But we realized, no, we're not. It's 30 years has passed, and also it's fair game and the whole thing. And so it was quite a moment of, again, we're powering. The only reason why that other Amiga didn't work was because I killed it. It probably would have been fine. It did have a tiny little bit of damage because I didn't clip the battery, but I did clip it from mine. That was, I remember I had a hair up my butt one night, and it was literally at night, and I was in my bed going, I think the battery in my old Amiga is gonna eat that motherboard, because it's been years since that. And I literally got up in the middle of the night, went to the shed with one of these, actually it's very similar to this thing, one of these, head things with a light. And I went to my shed and I found the Amiga, went through everything. There was spiders, and there was like black widow spiders. It was like nighttime, the whole thing. And I went and I opened up my Amiga and cut the thing off of it. And I realized it started to do its thing. And I was like, oh, just in time. And I closed it up knowing it was a job well done. It's like, I'll get to that later. Now, I did get to my Amiga later, and I copied all the hard drives onto the PC, and I had that emulator that would allow you to run. It was a Windows-based thing, not Windows. It was a PC-based thing that you'd run. I think it was Clonto that made it. I can't remember who made it, and it was QLX. Is that it? QLX?
Doesn't ring a bell.
QL something. And anyway, it would run. I found a disk, and then it would basically run. I got everything copied across to that, knowing my Amiga was now safe on that thing, and it worked like a champ. That machine I completely forgot about until I threw it away. Like an idiot, right? So anyhow, I forgot at that time in the middle of the night that the Digital Domain Amiga, I didn't clip the one from that. Now, there was damage, but there wasn't that much damage. So we got lucky. But then we weren't lucky when I plugged in 240 volts into it. But then going back to the time that it was giving stuff away, I gave a whole bunch of stuff away. I had amassed a collection of a whole bunch of video games consoles, which I gave all away. I had hundreds of cartridges in their boxes, absolutely perfect, with instruction manuals, gave them all away. Didn't make a penny from it. And then after that, that's when the Amiga 4000s were going for like $4,000 or $5,000 on eBay. And I was like, but it didn't matter. It's not really for the money, but it's just like, and it would have just made me keep them anyway. So I'm happy and I'm glad that they're all gone away. But the PC that I'd made into being the Amiga one, literally went, I don't even know what this machine is. I can't remember what this machine was for. I booted it up and it came up with something. It was like, this could be familiar. I don't care about this machine. It's a PC. Screw it. It's too old. I don't care what's on it. It doesn't matter. And I literally put it out onto the lawn, and it was gone in like 5 minutes. I literally went inside, came back, it was gone. And then, later on, I was like, wait a minute. I had a backup of all my Amiga stuff on that machine that was a PC. But I realized it didn't boot without the CD-ROM. It needed the CD-ROM to boot from. And that's why I switched on and came up with something like, who cares? And then I threw it away. I found the disc just literally like a month ago. Actually, I found the disc when I was looking for these discs. When I was looking for the Worms. So I'm like, oh wait, I realize now why I threw that machine away. It was a clone of my Amiga 4000. But the funny thing is that all of my drives on the Amiga, Christian Perifractic restored. He got all of them working. He got them all. He got all the data off them, and he extracted all the data, which took him a lot of time, and he backed it up onto the archive. He allowed me to go in and delete a bunch of stuff because it was my personal machine as well. But I left a whole bunch of stuff that was emails and letters. There was a bunch of stuff, and it's been pointed out to me. There's some stuff on there. It's like, oh, that shouldn't have been there. But hey, I was just amazed that the damn thing worked and you could extract it. And now you can actually download you can actually download a bootable image of my old machine. That you download it and it's my machine, all the drives, everything. And Lightwave works on it. Everything, I think all the Worm scenes are in there. Wow. From Worms 1 anyway. Yeah, it's cool. It's amazing that now we're living in a world where the Amiga is, I hear it being mentioned so much more, especially with the A500 being released.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had an Amiga, and I don't think I'd ever go without an Amiga.
Yeah, it's funny. They've always been a part, and I think now, as we're older, I think now we're realizing it's not something to be, oh, Amiga is my old. Like, no, it's absolutely celebrated. It was a magical time that is now becoming just as magical. I think, we're in a real place that we used to have home computers that people would, could program on and you could make stuff on. I feel nowadays you don't make I don't see, unless I think there's a bridge, there's a gap for the work that it takes for the average person to try and do something programmery or trying to do something. You'll use an app on a PC or a Mac, but back in the day then, the distance between trying something and the availability of even having BASIC on the machine or whatever, or even scripting, it was so simple to try things out. It was like, oh, I'll script this. I'll make a little thing and it'll do this and it'll do that and it'll do this. And you had more power over the computer, and I felt like you knew a lot more. It was just at that limit of, I know what all these things are for. These are all libraries. That's for sound. That's for this. That's for my this, that. I know what all these are for. And it was just at that thing. Now, if you look at the apps that you have on your phone, there's so many, you don't know how many you have, you don't care about any of them. Still in a PC, when a PC gets too bad, you're like, I can't deal with this. Like I've got a Windows machine and it got to the stage of, it was so weird. And I tried to fix it, tried to reinstall it. I'm like, the only way to do it is nuke it from space and do a total reinstall. I've never needed to do a total reinstall on an Amiga because it's actually fundamentally simpler. It's a single user, thing. And it was at that level that it was approachable to so many other people. And I think we're not at that place nowadays. A lot more coders nowadays, but the work that it takes, you have to be far more devoted to become that type of person. And I feel that there was a lot more casual things. There was a lot, even I remember back in the days with Scion, that people say, oh, I made a little program on my Scion pocket computer, it was a lot more approachable to make things and do things. And I don't think we have that in that same way now. So apart from like Arduino, Arduino and Raspberry Pi stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a little bit of the old spirit of the 90s coming back a bit with the indie scene and stuff, which is nice to see.
It really is, yeah.
So we've discussed Digital Domain a fair bit. So obviously, visual effects company co-founded by James Cameron. So how did you transition from Team 17 to going to LA and doing all that?
Well, that was bananas. So it was weird when it's funny because my uncle Derek, he emigrated years ago and went to Canada and became a doctor there. So the idea of moving abroad was always, I knew it was a thing that people did, but it was really weird. I remember when two friends of mine, Charlie Wallace, from the Wallace family, descendant of the Wallace family, He was a programmer, a great guy at Team 17. He had already said, I was thinking he was going to move to the States. And then John Allardyce, he moved to the States. He got a job at Foundation Imaging. And it was only then that I was like, wait, you can move, you can get a job in a different country for doing this? Are you kidding? What? What? It was bananas. And so I was like, wait a minute. So at that point then I was doing intros. We did the X2 intro, Project X, and we're working on different stuff. But then it felt like the intro thing was being leaned back a little bit from. It was already being done. Everyone done it. So we were really starting to not do those at Team 17. So I was trying to get into doing other things. And it wasn't that, I mean, they wanted me to stay. I knew that. I mean, that wasn't a thing. I knew that I was going to be doing lots of different things and still doing graphics. And, I was really doing a lot more management there as well. And I loved doing that. I loved doing all that organization. And so I was kind of, as well as doing the art, I was doing art I was kind of good at like dealing with people, like dealing with working with the artists. I love doing that. But I was surrounded by amazing people. It was fantastic. We were surrounded by the most amazing talent. It was, and again, you see where a lot of these people have gone on to from now, and you're like, my God, it was just such an amazing sweet spot of talent and genuinely nice people. I mean, I keep in contact with a lot of people, from Team 17. Still talk to Mike Green all the time. There's a bunch of people that I talk to, so it's really, and Martin and Debbie Beswick, and there's other people I still chat to as well regularly. But so when I was working at Team 17, I knew there was more things to be done, and it's a part of me that thinks, wow, I wonder if I'd stayed, what it would have been like. I wonder what it would have been like, in the long, because they had a lot of tough years, and then they're having a great time now. And I see the guys that were like the games testers are now senior management with families and everything. And it's just wonderful to see, really, really heartwarming. But for me, when I saw Apollo 13, I was like, oh, because I love that movie. And then I saw like Contact, and I saw that was done by this other company, and they were doing stuff in a different way. And I was like, who's that using Lightwave? Oh, and then I found out this company called Station X that was this breakaway company from Digital Domain that broke away from Digital Domain that were using Lightwave to do their own Lightwave company. I was like, oh my God, there's a lot of stuff going on there for visual effects. And then Titanic came out, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I was like, I think we're going to work. I want to work there. Could I do that? Is that allowed? So, and then John actually got a job at Digital Domain, and I was like, holy crap. Now his job at Digital Domain was he didn't work there for that long, and then he went and worked at Foundation Imaging. And then so basically I didn't know if it was going to be Digital Domain at that point, but I had a lot of good luck, that's for sure. And the right things happening at the right time. So what I did was I made a demo reel of all the stuff that I'd done, and I got them converted to NTSC onto VHSs, and I sent a whole bunch of VHSs across to different companies. And I said, I'm a blah, 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 blah. I want to, I work in games industry. I want to break into visual effects and commercials of films, and Didn't really hear anything back. And I said, I'll be traveling to LA to come and do visits and do blah, blah, blah. If you want to contact me, I'll be here during this time. And at that time, I didn't have a laptop. I didn't have anything. I had my Scion Series 3, Series 3A or C or something. Anyway, one of those, 3C, I think it was. And I had a little modem. And I got this Scion world that allowed you to have a local call in LA or anywhere. You had all these different numbers. You had a little sheet. And it's like, if you're in the States, if you're in Los Angeles, you call this number. If you're in this place, and it'd be a free number. And I remember I got it working. And the first time I got to my hotel and I plugged it in, and I plugged it into the phone that was there in the room. And I plugged it in. I was like, okay, here we go. And it connected and it's like connected to Scion world. I'm like, oh my God, it's like downloading emails. I was like, I'm receiving emails in a foreign country, in a hotel. And this little pocket computer would come around with me everywhere, but it was my main thing. I'd come home, I'd come to the, come back to the hotel room, plug it in. So I got there and I sent a whole bunch of emails out to different people. Band from the Ranch, Pixar, Digital Domain, Rhythm and Hues, blah, blah. There was a bunch of different companies. And there was another one, Digital Illusions. There was a bunch. And then anyway, I got a contact with some people and they said, hey, yeah, we're not hiring right now, but we'd love to meet you. Let's meet for lunch. And these people I've been friends with for years. And then I was having lunches with people just because people were friendly, and it was a new industry, and having visual effects artists coming from the UK was a new thing. And then I met people that turned out were at Digital Domain on different places. So that was just fantastic. But then I started just going around like cold calling and calling up and said, hey, I'd like to come in, speak to your HR department and blah, blah, blah. So I sent a demo reel to Digital Domain, and I called up and said, hi, Cris Blyth here. I sent a reel to so-and-so. Can I speak to the HR department? And they put me through and said, yeah, we'll get back to you if there's anything. We get like 200 a week, which they did, which I know I got. Later on, when you're at Digital Domain, part of the thing was when you're in a downtime, you had to go through those reels. It was brutal sometimes. But anyhow, but I thought I'm just going to totally bullshit my way in. So I went to Digital Domain and I parked. And when they went in, they went, who are you here to see? I went, oh, I'm here to see Lawrence Plotkin, the head of HR. And they went, oh, come on in. Total fabrication. I was there to see him. I didn't have an appointment. So I went in and then I stood in line, and there was a girl who was very bubbly and friendly, Andrea Basada. And for some reason, there was a line of 2 or 3 people waiting to talk to her, right? And then behind me, there was this guy, and he was sneezing. And I went, Gesundheit. And he went, oh. And he went, where are you from? He goes, oh, I'm from Scotland. He goes, no, where are you from in Scotland? I know where you're from, Scotland. I started chatting with him. And he was very friendly. And it's like, oh, he goes, oh, yeah. So, and then we didn't speak about much because at that point, Andrea, well, I didn't know at that time, she goes, oh, who are you here to see? I went, oh, I'm here to see Lawrence Plotkin, the head of HR. And she went, oh, really? Do you have an appointment? I went, no, but I called and I didn't get an answer, and I'm only in here for a short time. And she went, really? And you don't have an appointment and you're just walking in here? And so I was like, uh-huh. And then she started to do this. She started looking over her shoulder. And I was like, and he turned and went, I'm Lawrence Plotkin. I was like, busted. I was totally busted. And he went, and he looked at me and went, come on. And he went, is that your reel? I went, yeah. And he went, come on. And he took me through to this room. And on my demo reel, I had like the titles of what I did and who did what, because there was other people that worked on things, and if it was on a team effort and what I did in each one. And so it was like a title card that came up, then it faded, very BBC style, very slow, very comes up, fades down, the thing comes up, 2-second fade, wait for a second, titles come up, all the rules that you do in normal broadcasting world, not knowing that in the States it's like on, off, commercials, no end of part 1, part 2, none of that stuff. It's just like in your face, do. So anyway, the video starts playing and he looks at the titles, and then the titles fade, and then it comes up and he looks down and he's like, and then it finishes and he looks up and the titles for the next one come up and he goes, and then it goes down and then it fades out. And it's like every time he was looking at it, he was like looking down, and then he got a phone call. He's like, yeah, yeah, like this. And I'm like, well, you know what? I tried. It's obviously he's not interested like this. And then it finished and he was like, okay, well. And I was like, well, it was really lovely to meet you. And, it's just the opportunity to come in. And he goes, where are you going? I went, oh, I thought we were finished. And he goes, no, you have to come and meet some people. I was like, okay. And we went upstairs and I met Rob Legato, Eric Barba, Mark Loaf, and another guy, Mark Lannan. I know, that was it. And I was like, I knew I didn't know Mark Loaf at the time, but I knew Eric Barba because he did Sequest DSV, and he was like this young hotshot guy. And of course, I knew Rob Legato good Lord. I came to this, I was like this. And they played my demo reel and they were looking at it and they were like, what did you do this? And what did you do that? How did you do this? What was this? What was this? And they totally peppered me like this. And they went, okay, can we have a minute? I went, sure. And I went outside and they came back and they went, we don't normally do this. We'd like to give you an offer straight on the spot. I went, okay. And I didn't know what the next move on this went. So we'd like to give you an offer. Would you like a job here? I'm like, yes. Yes, I would. Trying to keep as calm as I could. And I went, okay. And then they called Lawrence over. And then I went across with Lawrence and I was kind of like, okay. I went, oh yeah, so I guess you're going to be joining us. We'll get the visa stuff done. Problem come through. Met this girl called Deata Grant. And I went in, they said, okay. And so this is going to be your pay. And this, I'm like, okay. Yeah. Total imposter syndrome kicking in. Like, do they not realize I'm just a guy and I use a mouse and I move it around and press things until things happen, right? Total imposter syndrome. But then I got in my car, my rental car, and I'd go out. I went, finally went, and I remember the guy that got me was Wendell was his name. He goes, hey, I'll see you. I said, I'll see you soon. He goes, oh, very good. Really? He was from Jamaica. And he goes, I'll see you soon. And I got in the car, drove around, stopped the car right outside. Some water is making a whole bunch of noise. I got in the car, drove around right outside, and then and I went, ah! And I screamed in my car with all the windows up like, ah! Like this, only to realize that all the windows were open on the side of Digital Domain, and there was like people wandering around. I was like, oh, gear, drive, and I drove away. And then, that was it. And then at that point, literally, I got back to the UK, and then I heard of this thing of they're putting a total ban on new H-1B visas coming in. No more. And I was like, oh shit. And they said, oh, it's no problem. We'll get our way through this. I'm like, but they're saying there's no more for it was a big deal that year. There's no more. It's not happening. Got far too many of these people coming across and taking our jobs and taking our women. Right. And it was really put the kibosh on. And then, so they elevated my case. And then, and this sounds so surreal, from Jim Cameron. Now, he didn't write it, but of course, somebody wrote it and made it look like I will single-handedly save the United States, right? Very, very positive letters. And it came with FedEx, and they said, you have to show this to the people and then they have to reprocess it. It has to come through. So there was a reason why, I can't remember why, they had to send it to me to do something with. And then I sent it like this, and then I got totally pulled in like that. And so on my first day, and so I got across, it was this crazy. On my first day, I walked around, and then I literally I knew that Scott Ross was the other person that did it. And I was wandering around, and I saw this guy, and I went, Scott Ross. And he went, oh, yeah. And I went, hey, come into my office. I was like, and went in, and he goes, oh, so you're from Scotland? I said, yeah, that's right. And he goes, I have an open door policy. You can always come in and check in with me. And I was like, cool. And he goes, hey. And as he was getting up, he was like, you better be worth it. And I was like, oh, shit. So, and then that was it. And then I got put into the first feature that I worked on. Was not a good film. It had really good special effects, but the film was one of these ones that the direction went weird. They had to rewrite it. We were literally changing the story as it was going along. There was one part that's like this simulated, lovemaking scene was in space and zero gravity. And like, we have to make this person African-American, not white. Like,
oh my God.
So totally different body structure, totally different proportions of the body to leg, hip, okay, so there was that. The movie was called Supernova. There was a tragic story. It had some good parts in it, but there was some really literally they were painting the sets as they were changing them and everything like that. The visual effects was really good, and that was my first thing. And then the second thing I worked on was commercials, and I worked on the I think it was one of the first things. I'm probably getting the order mixed up here a little bit, but I worked on a Michael Bay commercial for Nike, and the Michael Bay commercial had commercials for the commercial. They were totally grandstanding. It's like, there's going to be a commercial for the commercial. They're making a deal out. They're making commercials for the commercial. This commercial was coming. And it was a huge, like the set was like $5 million or something. It was super, super expensive set. It was amazing. And anyway, we'd had to do, there was a thing with this robot, this head of this person. It turned out he didn't know he was a robot or something, but anyway, he got detached from his head. His head was rolling down a hill, and they did it practically, and it didn't look that good. It did look good, but they were wanting to see what it looked like with CG. So we scanned this guy called Harlan Williams, this comedian. We scanned his face and did the whole thing, and we did a really good job on it. And then of course we took the head and put it inside the fridge for people to be scared when they open up the fridge, because we had the head with all these wires coming, because it was supposed. And of course you put it in the fridge, and there was a hand. Of course, you put the hand. We had all sorts of fun with that. But anyhow, we did this digital version of him, and it did look better because he was enunciating stuff, and we were taking the. We just did a good job, and that was, I think, Doug McLean, Doug Wolf. There's a bunch of people that worked on that, and anyhow, at that point, Michael Bay did not like CG, and so when we're having the meeting, he came across and we're showing which one is which. And he goes, "Oh, I like that one. Which one's that one?" And so it was like, "Oh, that's the CG one." He was like, and he basically went to the person like, "Fuck you, CG," and walked out, or something. It was something like that. I can't remember it clearly, but he didn't like the fact that the CG one was better.
He's changed his tune now, hasn't he?
Oh, absolutely no, yeah. But and then there was a there was the Busta Rhymes music video with Janet Jackson.
Oh no way!
Busta Rhymes came in, this big, huge, dark, deep voice guy. We did so many like cool. There was such. I wasn't involved in all of them, but everyone was always involved in lots of different bits. You would sometimes be on it a little bit, and then you get pulled into something. If so everyone, the amount of times people would help me on a job and fix something, and it was my job, and then oh, well done, Chris. It's like, oh, it was actually Dave. Wherever we were a really close-knit team, and the way that it worked as well there is that we were on this area where we had our cubes that were so high, but we're in a kind of echoey area, and we're working on something, and and because Lightwave doesn't load anything into it, it doesn't have the assets inside. It references them always. I remember Jay Barton say, "Load up version 35 of the car." Or whatever, and say, okay, and we'd load it up and do a replace and stuff, and say, oh, dude, the wheels are backwards. Sorry. Save. Okay, right, try it now. Yeah, it's fine now. That would take out 5 emails and 3 weeks of work of this, and all the way it works now is not efficient in the way that you used to have a team within shouting distance of each other. No phones, no emails, and then sometimes I'd say, we're working on something, you'd finish something, and say, I'm up. And then Eric would go, all right, I got something for you. Come here. And I'd walk around and go, see this? Can you fix this and dial this and put a bit of shader on this? And then just save the object. I'll load it into the scene. Okay. And he'd walk across. How about that? And he'd just walk across. Yeah, a bit more of this, bit of paint here. Save. He goes, that looks great. All right. Right. Save it. All right, good. Load it in. Yeah, looks great. Fine. Moving on. The amount of all that. So the speed that we could work in comparison to features caused trauma. There was a lot of this going on, as we were seeing as the dirty NT Lightwave renegades, those filthy buggers. And instead of the pristine SGI, features kind of pipeline way of doing things. Now that's changed. Now we're all friends and stuff. But back then there was we were seen as second-class citizens for sure.
Wow. So your skills from working at Team 17 just directly translated to this industry, presumably.
Well, it did, but man, again, I found myself surrounded by, when you're working in games, you're surrounded by people that are amazing at games. You see people coding a menu and doing graphics and stuff, that doing plasma things, and they're doing it, and they're just changing numbers, and they're flying away and then coding it and sending it to the machine, going, all right. And it's just on such a different level on the games division. So then when I was coming into this area that was all art, we had the model shop next door that are building things, and they're just and so again, I had a massive inferiority. Like, oh my God, they're just going to figure out I'm not an artist. These are artists. Now, of course, everyone else was feeling the same thing. We just didn't know it. And we're all just having the same battle. But so yeah, I took all the Lightwave skills there and I had a good sense. I mean, I've got an art background because my dad was an artist and I did art at college, and so I've got a full art background. Love painting and drawing, stuff like that, but I didn't there. And at the time, the 3D artists weren't given Wacom tablets; they were given mouses at best, But yeah, so my skills were transferred. But man, I really felt like, if you were like jumping out of a car and having to go from nothing to running at full speed, that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
When I felt like I was going to fall over and tumble, and people are going to go, "Oh, look, he's tumbling," So you really had to. So we find ourselves working really hard at night and staying there to really put the extra hours in. And, it's like, I have to totally, and you go into that, I've got to prove myself kind of trap, that thankfully I'm not in now. But in the same way, you've got a lot of other people that are really coming up at the same time doing amazing things. And you're like, you really feel that peer pressure. But yeah, it did allow me to kind of, I think that the fact that we were doing such kind of renegade new stuff at Team 17, and we didn't really know it, but we were breaking molds left, right, and center and trying new things and putting stuff in that was funny. Even when Andy did the director's cut of Total of Worms, we just made some team names. Oh, this is your team. Like, what words do you want in there? And I did Gordy, which is my cat at the time. My wife at the time, Angela. So I put Angela in there. That was another team. Boobies.
Of course. And
then the last team name, I just went Amiga. And that was it. That was my team name. But now that's in there. And that's in the A500 forever, which is really quite funny. You'd never think that something that you did back then would still be around and now permanently on a ROM, that people could load up. And then now know the story behind, and there's all sorts of Easter eggs and things that were in there. Some I can't talk about.
Okay.
Yeah, because some stuff might be released.
Oh, I see. Okay, watch this space then.
We'll see if the extra packs or the extra art packs for Worms United and Worms Reloaded or whatever it's called, if those get released and they get like as an over-the-air update or whatever, how they update the A500, I don't know, you download it, whatever. There's some interesting stuff in there.
Excellent. So just going back in time from that to Team 17.
Sure.
Were you given any kind of brief for the sequences?
So John Allardyce had a lot of these ideas kind of like laid out. And so basically I was brought in to help him to finish, not to finish, but to really, he'd done a couple all the way through, and there was another couple that had still got stuff. And then there was other ones that had no ideas. We just started writing down titles. Kamikaze. Oh yeah, you do that. Okay, this. All right. But they weren't mapped out at all. And then, we did take the time to kind of draw them out. And then propose some of them. We had this one called, we did one that was like Doom, was basically with the worms arms of the Uzis going. We animate the whole thing. We rendered the whole thing, and we made everything else, the other ones look like Doom, and we rendered the whole walls, everything. It was done, and it's still out there actually. It's on my Amiga archive probably.
Excellent.
But anyway, then we contacted ID or ID or whoever they're called, and they were McCormick. He was like, nope. I think there's still an E for that. He's like, nope, we don't feel that. And I'm like, damn, because it was funny. But as it turned out, we just came up with other ones, and there was a couple ones that we did, like the end sequence is for Worms 2 or Worms. It was for the one with Ocean, with the the music at the beginning, and then it had micropros, and then the drums coming in, and then the guitars, and then the guns coming up, and then them being too heavy and then falling over. I came up with that idea in the shower, and it was literally like my last day before we were going on holiday. And I had thought of the sequence of the do, but I hadn't got it going together. Then I thought, let's have a funny ending, right? And so I thought of that idea in the shower, and then I called Rory. I'm like, "Are you going to be in today? Because we're all tired. Are you going to be in?" He goes, "Yeah, I could come in," because we were going on our holidays, and I was going on my holiday. I was literally I was going to Florida, funnily enough, where I'm going tomorrow, and and I woke up and I had this idea in the shower. I was like, all right. And then I went and saw Bjorn. I'm like, I need to do this thing. And I literally was like, it goes like this. And then or something, you know, like that. And he was like, okay. And Rory was like, I got it. And then so Bjorn started doing the drums like this. And then I started doing the thing. And we just put it together in literally, it must have been 20 minutes. And then Rory did this at the end, went down. It was like, we got it, we nailed it. And Rory was like, that's it, we're done. He was like, okay, I don't have anything else to do. He'd come from Harrogate. Anyway, and then I took it and I got this idea of the whole thing of the like that. And I recorded it and I animated it, did the whole thing. And I was leaving like the next morning and I got it all rendered done and everything, put it together. And it went bam. I said, look, we've got our pre-intro now. And it was totally not the part beginning was kind of, maybe we'll do something microprose, but it wasn't this. It wasn't that. That happened in the morning, and we made it happen in the morning. I animated it and got it done. It was done by the afternoon, and then boom, I was off to Florida. And so at the end, we were really slick. We had it all my animations for all the stuff there, and that was cool. And I think that's got to be in Worms. I can't remember which Worms it was. Even was that Worms 1 or 2?
I think I thought it was 1 that had him falling over. Unless
and he goes, huh?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Wait a minute. The Worms that was Worms 1, and then we did the other one, Worms 2, where the guy had a banana.
Oh right.
He has a banana and he goes, oh, and he throws it, and then there's an explosion and he goes like, oh, and then he goes away. Yeah. And that was that. I think I'm getting all of them jumbled up. But yeah, anyway, yeah, having all that done in like that short period of time, that was like right at the end.
Wow.
Yeah, the beginning, that and then he comes up. That was Bjorn Lynn. All of that one where he brings up the thing and then goes, oh, that was for Worms 1. Well, that one was all planned out. We had that. So we had the guys from we had SGI guys visit us. They were trying to sell us some SGI workstations with back at the time, it was before Maya. It was Alias Wavefront. And now it's become that's they're now products of Power Animator, and Alias is now Maya. Now they've got Maya, and now they've got Max. I'm going to put it's just
no.
But anyhow,
Rare. Sorry, go on. I was going to say Rare had the SGI machines, and
yeah, they did.
And they were using Wavefront
for pinball for one of our pinball games, and so they did all the depth calculation. Stefan Boberg was figuring out all the depth, so the ball would be naturally behind and in front of stuff on a 3D table. He did all that stuff. It was amazing. But anyway, they were like, "How did you do the dynamics of the gun of the bullets doing this?" I'm like, "It's a bone chain. We did it by hand. If you're an animator, just do." And it was so fast. So when you're working in wireframe back then, it was fast as hell. The idea of it going to wireframe, even on Amiga 4000. When it was wireframe on Amiga 4000, it was really fast. But even then, if you didn't want that, just put it to bones or outline wireframe, and then anything was fast, and you still have the movement. So the software really adapted itself to the restrictions of the machine, and so scrubbing that stuff was super. You didn't make previews; you just play them, and then if you want to show off for someone, you'd put it into proper wireframe mode, and then do another preview, and then you'd see it, and it was still pretty fast back then. It was interesting. We were limited by our poly count, and so we were limited by our memory, and so that therefore you didn't have things that were too heavy in the shot because you couldn't. So it that was it did allow us to just really work fast. It was really amazing. We didn't realize the kind of the speed and the no Slack, less emails, no things. We'd have board with things written on, and we'd all look at the board and we'd all talk about that. And then you'd walk into other people's offices and say, "Hey, can you do this?" Or that whole inter-office smaller company thing. Man, I really see the value of now. I see people nowadays that say they break away from corporate and go and build their own small company. Now I totally get it, because that's where the magic is, if you ask me. You know, that's that speed, and also you don't need to have corporate events or team building. You were always with these people and you love hanging out with them. So you're going to go to the bar. There was times that I got super frustrated, and I had a temper when it comes to machines and things not working. Like if things weren't working, I would get very angry at the keyboard, which did follow me to Digital Domain, that they actually did. Team 17, as a going away present, they sent it to me, bought me an industrial keyboard that you can't break. And it's like, nice. But this is for when you go to Digital Domain, so you don't, embarrass yourself. But I would lose it. And my thing that I do is just hit the keyboard and all the keys would come up like Boggle. It was kind of crazy. So I had at one point this trail of keyboards leading to my office at Digital Domain, and I had all this cool lighting going on, and it was just this hanging down of all these things, the trail of dead keyboards. But I've passed that now. I don't, well, mostly. But anyway, there was a time that I was working, and I used to work against the desk. I would sometimes go to my monitor and just hit it. But it's CRTs are actually quite tough, and it would just knock off the back. And I got in trouble because it hit the plasterboard behind and dented the wall. Then we came up with this idea at Team 17, because we're all working against the walls. We said, let's change the room around. Let's make it that we're in a kind of zigzag pattern. My back's against the wall, but then if I look to the left or right, I'd see Rory McLeish and see Neil South there, right? And Rory Little was there, Rory McLeish was over there, and then Mark Taylor was over there. We'd be able to look at each other, so we'd exercise our eyes from going from our monitor to the wall. So we'd be facing into the room, right? Which is great. But I forgot at that time when I got angry that I was facing in the room. And so, God, this is really bad. Martin came in to say, "Hey, how's it going?" like this. And I went, balls. And I hit my monitor. And I forgot it wasn't against the wall. And the monitor went down behind it and took everything with it. And then my PC went, like, these movies when something goes off the side of a boat and they realize that the rope is attached to that person, and they go, uh-oh, and they go, woof. That's what happened. My monitor, and then my PC went whoop, and over the end, and everything landed in a huge pile. And I was like, and I looked up and I was still furious because I was so mad at something like this. And then Martin went, "Let's go for a pint." And I was like, okay. And I just got up and just left everything there. And so we went for a drink, and he goes, you can't get that. You just hit something else. I said, "Dude, I just forgot. I wasn't against my wall." I said, "I need my wall back." He goes, "No, you have to just chill out, man. You can't take so much anger out in the machines." He said, "It's expensive." So anyway, I've realized that the movie Office Space, we see them taking the baseball bat to that was kind of me. But again, I'm more mature now. I get I'm embarrassed now talking about it a little bit. But there were times that it was tough, just simply because you were dealing with different budgets, and you were dealing with software, and that was really restrained, and some of the stuff you couldn't do. And then actually that's the truth there. When we moved to the Amiga, when we moved to Lightwave on the PC, that's when the blue screens of death, that's when they hit. That's actually a really valid point, is that whole time of, we'd rarely get, Lightwave didn't crash that much. As long as you looked at the number of your memory and you didn't go down too low, Lightwave itself really wouldn't crash. We'd have other programs going on the background. And but it got to a situation because we knew all the software that we're running with. We didn't get all these constant updates. The operating system wasn't constantly. It was like Workbench 3.1. That's that for years.
Yeah.
And so it became, and then also because of that, when they put software out, it was super stable because they were putting it onto 1 billion floppy disks and they had to test the crap out of it. So things were in a different world then. And so, yeah, here's a really good point. I never hit my Amiga. I did once, and I hit the 0 key. And after that point, I didn't hit it again. I hit the 0 key and it actually broke. And that was my own fault. It still worked, but it broke. But my anger was never at my Amiga. The way that Lightwave would work, you'd work for an awful long time with it just working. You know, dealing with like Maya or Blender's not so bad, but all of them nowadays are just, and then the way that it's so complex nowadays with the way that everything works. Like you start up Maya, it takes 10 minutes to load Maya, you know, for it's loading all this crap and loading all the stuff that's connected to the other stuff in the network and, you know, everything else. And it's really, Maya now feels like a massive pile of band-aids. And anyone that's long enough will exactly know what I mean. Anyone that's coming to it nowadays might feel like that's the way it's always been and just get used to it. But some of the stuff that's inside some of the new software, some of the stuff I like the way that it was with Lightwave, it was laid out that on the corner of your eye you could see the yellow shapes. Sorry. And you would know that I am moving an object, or I am rotating an object, or I am moving the camera. You would literally know without looking, you could see the shape at the corner. Then when they went to just like the strip, you'd have to look. And then you're also reading, then going to icons. And now some people read iconography quicker. Some people read words quicker. I can look at an icon for like 10 minutes. I have actually a borderline issue with icons, is that I can look at them and say, somebody say, is that icon on your screen? I'll go, nope. Like, look again. Look down the list of icons. Mail, no, iTunes. Nope, it's not there. I'm like, look again. It's like, oh, there it is. It was hiding. So icons, the ones that I really like are Nuke. I think the Nuke icons are great. Rob Naderhost did most of those. But I find icon-based things, when they went to that, it all became quite crap for me in that way. I just don't work that way. Seeing the shapes in the corner worked for me. And again, I think that there was much more thought back then was put into the software that works, and also getting a solid product out before you get it out the door. And that was for us in the game. We couldn't do an over-the-air update on Worms. You had to get it right. And so we went through so many gold masters, like it was ridiculous, but then they were pricey. I remember, doing that kind of stuff. Excuse me. Wow. Flu. And, getting that stuff out the door was always hairy. But it was like they had games testers just go crazy on it it was very boring for them, I can imagine. But I think overall there was more of a cohesion between the hardware and the software when we're working on that. It was just, I knew we were doing a lot of new things that probably look really easy now. And, going into, say, Blender cold now is great, but you can feel, back in the day when we were using Lightwave, you could feel that Alan Hastings and Stuart did oh, hang on, I'm going to get them mixed up now. One did the modeling and one did the animation. And there was two programs. One was called Modeler and one was called Layout. And you could tell two different people, but they still had some certain rules. Why is this way? Is that way? All these, the way that things would work, they weren't totally different. There was some things that were like totally different keys, but they did get that figured out. But it was kind of like when you're working in that program, like, okay, I know these keys. With Blender now, you can feel hundreds of people of influence, and even the program goes against itself in so many ways. They say Z is up and Y is away, Z, right? And Y is away. But then when you're talking about a Z depth pass, it's going away from you. It's like you've got different people working in different ways. And so sometimes Z is away from you or Z is away from you. Sometimes Z is up. And so the program is, because it's been made by a lot of different people, you've got a lot of really different menus, cancel on the left, cancel on the right, escape. doesn't do this, you know, all different things. Don't escape with that. If you open up that menu and press escape, you'll crash a machine or whatever. You know, you've got so many different bugs going on, different things that interfere with each other. Now, they're doing an amazing job, but the updates are daily. You know, when you're dealing with Lightwave back there, and I think all 3D software, like Imagine, I remember people having like multiple instances of Imagine, like 10 instances of Imagine running, and they'd have all the different objects loaded in different ones. And they'd work on that one and save that, and they'd have one that was their layout, and they'd be beating on those machines. And it was like, you've got 10, because you could, back then, there was one of them, was it Imagine? I can't remember. You couldn't have layers. Lightwave had all these different layers loaded on different things. With Imagine, I think it was only one, or was Turbo Silver. I'm maybe getting them mixed up. And then it was just one at a time, just one, right? And so you'd literally have 10 things and be working on all of them and then saving them and loading them into the main thing and then working on that. And these machines would take a beating, and they would just work. So yeah, that cohesion between hardware and software, and probably less people working on that actual program. They're much simpler programs. We lived in simpler times, but at that way, in the same way, you were dealing with something that was just, there was handfuls of people working on the software. Same with Worms, you know. So you know, the everything was more connected, and you had a responsibility as well. It wasn't like, oh, let's just get this one out and we'll fix it with a patch. There was none of that. One of the cool things they did at Team 17, though, was when the land versions of Worms came out and the pirate versions were out there, it was Martin's idea. We you know, when if you got pirated software, people say, oh, this is out, and you load it up and say, hey, brought to you by so-and-so, right? The first one would win, whoever gets it out first. So now I'd have to really go check with Martin on this one, but Team 17 put out their own copy, their own hacked version, so that they could monitor the cracked versions. So when they, on the LAN version, when you could go and play over the internet, it would come with a little pirate flag of who was a pirated software, and you could kick them off. So we were the ones that put the software out, because you got people that are going to buy the software, and you got people that are going to pirate it. Doesn't matter, you know. And so that was the way of keeping an eye on things. It's funny that the pirate flag was the flag for Digital Domain. That was their official flag, is the pirate flag. And when you leave Digital Domain, everyone gets a flag. Flag was flying at Digital Domain. You get that flag, and then everyone signs it. It's kind of like a badge of honor. I don't think it happens now. It was only back in the early days. I mean, now Digital Domain has had thousands of employees, you know, hundreds of bodies have passed through there. And so, you know, if you were to rejoin, you'd be like employee number 6,000 or something like that. But I was employee number 212. There was 212 people there, you know, so I at least was, and there was more. At one point we had, you know, thousands of, at least 1,000 people. We had so much work. We had these cabins built in the car park for extra work, overflow work, you know. But I didn't realize how early on I was in at Digital Domain, and I didn't realize how early on I was at Team 17. You know, it was really like, I was there when it was the classic Amiga times, but it was at a time when copying and cracking and software was so popular that that's what killed it. You couldn't sell a game, and that was the big problem. It wasn't that the Amiga wasn't popular. The Amiga was super popular, but there was all this interest and then no sales, and that's what killed it. You know, that's what killed it. But it didn't kill it, did it? Because here we are.
There you go.
Yeah,
it'll live forever.
What game do you go to? What game do you, when you go to the Amiga, what game do you play?
Well, earlier today I was playing Turrican 2. That's definitely on there.
Yeah.
Cannon Fodder I like.
Oh yeah, it's a great one.
I love Monkey Island.
Yeah,
I play Monkey Island a lot.
That's cool.
Although I play it on the DOS PC quite a bit as well, because it.
Oh yeah.
Is, you know.
Oh, the sound was good on that one.
The sound's good, yeah. Although, like you were saying earlier, the Amiga just works. But when I got there like a Windows 98 DOS PC here that I kind of play DOS games on, and just when you first set it up and getting the sound cards working and everything, it's just so annoying.
It's unbelievable how complex it was. Again, you know, when things were working back, I mean, when the Amiga first came out, I think people didn't quite understand the fact that all of this music you were hearing was coming at the Amiga, when literally at that same time, early on anyway, there was a lot of PCs that were being sold with not even Sound Blaster cards.
Yeah.
Sound Blaster cards were coming out, at that particular, some of them before were just like, just literally just beeps,
beeps,
and it was so simple that I think that ease, it got past some people because they were used to everything being difficult, on the PC side. And I remember the first Amiga that I got and going through all the demos on those discs and everything. I remember getting all my clock and all the little ziggly lines and all those things going all at the same time, just thinking about all that speed, even on the 7 megahertz Amiga, and then all the custom processors around it, the calculations that were needing to be done for all of this to happen at once. It really made me understand, like, this, even that 7 megahertz with the support chips. It's like, this is actually accumulatively fast. Like, I've got a fascination with an old synthesizer called the Fairlight. The Fairlight CMI. It was in the 80s. It was that synthesizer, the white synthesizer that everyone would play. Right. And it was super, super expensive. Kate Bush in Running Up That Hill, she used that on that. Peter Gabriel was a big, Fairlight person. And as I saw Jean-Michel Jarre use it back in the day in the concerts in China. And I remember seeing going, I will have one of those. I don't know what it is, but I want that thing. And then, I do have one now just down there.
Awesome.
But it's been a bit of a fascination with me. But one of the things that's about it is that it also used a 68000 processor, but not for the main processors. It used two 6809s working in parallel. So this was in 1979, was a parallel, like, cycle swapping computer, right? And then basically that on its own isn't very fast at all. It couldn't do anything. Every card to make voices had its own set of, it was a basically standalone computer on each card for each voice. And so for each voice, it's its own computer. And the way that it worked was, you've got all these other chips and all these other support chips, similar to the Amiga, when you have them all working in concert, and I think that's where you get that amazing ability in something that, there's actually a lot of Fairlight samples on the Amiga too. There's tons of them on the Psygnosis stuff, but it's not just the 68000 on its own. It's all the other custom chips that at the time, it's like custom chips were not the thing. It was, now looking at it, it's like how remarkable it was to have all of those custom chips. It felt like a sneaky maneuver that they did to get all this amazing stuff in this Amiga 500. And I had Amiga 500 very early on. And then a friend of mine worked at Comet, and then the Amiga 500 Plus came out, and I managed to somehow say there was a problem with it and got it swapped out. So I got an Amiga 500 Plus. No, hang on, there's something going along there that isn't right. That's not right to my story. Because I remember having an Amiga 500 for a long time. Anyway, I had an Amiga 500 Plus, and that was amazing. That was such a machine.
That's what I had originally, the 500 Plus. Yeah.
It was because they didn't have enough Amiga 500s and they had to release them early, and they were in Amiga 500 boxes. I thought that was just the amazing. Like, you open it up, like, wait, this is a Plus. It's just amazing. So I think that how the story of that, and I've seen the stories that are just amazing. How they managed to fool, almost like when they made the Amiga original Amiga architecture of doing all this amazing stuff in the system that there was the joy board, or whatever they call it, was they managed to put all this amazing stuff together. That story of them getting it put together on a breadboard and then recompiling stuff the night before on breadboards that were all spaced out, they had to wire together for Comdex or whatever it was, and the fact that they actually had it going. Good Lord. I mean, it's just the amount of things that had to work. I mean, I work in electronics for my hobbies and stuff. And the amount of things that have to work to get those things to all work together is just phenomenal. It's and the fact is that they had only so much money and time to reroute all the to redo all the CAD and relay out all the chips and redo all that stuff. And there was always mistakes back then, and refix those. And knowing that it's like, okay, we've only got 3 more goes. That's it. And then once they're in production, they went through the revs of the different boards, but getting all that working, being in an Amiga 500, the amount of amazingly cool stuff that we took for granted, just the multitasking operating system, all of that. It was really, again, we didn't realize the magic that we had. Well, I think we did. I just think the world now realizes, like, that was then. You know, you look at a video of one of the Amiga demos on YouTube, it looks compressed, it looks crap. The actual video is like 180 megabytes if you download the video. And I try and explain this to my son. It's like, this was on a 7 megahertz computer with maybe that the whichever Amiga, let's say it was 512 kilobytes. It was less than a megabyte. I mean, most icons are more than a megabyte. You know what I'm saying? And I remember the wastefulness that I'd see when I'd see like a Windows machine and the clock was like 20 megs to run on Windows 95 or whatever it was. It was ridiculous. It was that efficiency and beauty. I think that's something I really think, even in the way, as I said previously, the way that you would be able to approach the simplicity of the startup sequence and go, this is figurable out. I can go in this. It's not so bad. You know, that cleanliness and simplicity, but still have all that the power in the music stuff. I listen to a lot of Amiga music. I'll still load up, like, you know, some Jasper Kids stuff and go, this is sometimes four, sometimes more, but this is basically 4 channels swapping out, being smart and doing amazing stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I find that absolutely, it made people work in an elegant way. And I think all of those restrictions, I've had the same thing. Like, I remember I had a honeymoon in Jamaica and I got one of these little steel drums. And it was a period of time that all I had to do was the steel drums. And I had the little restriction of, this is all I had. So I made a song on that only, because that's all I had. In the same way, you know, when you got 4 channels, like, okay, we'll make this work. But then somebody like, you know, Bjorn Lynn or Rob Hubbard would open a door and you'd realize, oh my God, we could do this. You could go into this world of, I didn't know you could do this. I didn't know you could cycle around these sounds and all of a sudden it sounded chunkier and, you know, got that sound. Like, what? And then all the cheats that they did and things that they did on the Commodore 64, they took that to the Amiga. You know, I remember there was a time I had an Atari 800 XL, and Rob Hubbard, all the covers of music on the Atari were kind of crap. And then I feel Rob Hubbard did Warhawk on the Atari 800. And it was one of the best versions of Warhawk. And it's all of a sudden like, wait, you can do cool music on the Atari? No one did. The music on the Atari was crap. And then Rob Hubbard did Warhawk. And it's like, and I listened to Warhawk literally last week. It's amazing how good that sounds as a song. And then they did the whole orchestral version, which I think is just amazing. But again, you're given 4 channels, and how people can do all that swapping out of stuff, it really, and again, I think there was a lot of really good composers back then. Some of the music for, you know, the World of Amiga demo as well. You look at that and you go, what? Even that whole pan and doing that stuff. It's like, I remember from some of the, you know, the coding guys of doing menus and stuff. It's like how much work that is, and the fact that they're they're loading shit off the floppy drive as it's showing it. You know, and then putting some cycles just to deal with that, and then uncompressing in memory during the time it's doing this other stuff. Yeah, I find all of that. I still find that fascinating, and it's obviously clearly decades has gone past, and I'm still like, yep, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's clever stuff.
Yeah.
Cris, you've given us a lot of time. Thank you so much. You know,
it's been good chat. It's getting me to stop is the problem.
No, I mean, we can go all night if you like. Although I am in danger of overheating. Jeez.
Yeah, I've actually got to. My daughter and I are recording today, so I've got to get downstairs. We've got a recording kind of studio downstairs. So I've actually I've been restoring actually been building a Fairlight CMI, and I've been doing it for the last year or so. And I'm so out of sync. I'm literally a year out on my videos that I'm looking at the videos and they're saying July 2021, and I'm so behind. I was supposed to be editing them this morning.
So you're uploading your
I've got
journey. So where can people keep track of what you're up to?
Oh, it's on. I'm building a Fairlight CMI, and the great synth restorers called Syntor actually asked me to put it on their channel, so it goes up on their channel as well as my channel, but there gets more traffic. it's really interesting. I get a lot of messages, even though it literally it's there's no views. I mean, I'll get like 25,000 views to 5,000 to 1,000. I don't do it for that. I did it because I'm doing it, and I'm doing something that I was told by Fairlight engineers was kind of like, yeah, you don't want to be doing that. It's a lot of work,
Right.
but I did it anyway. But it's just taken me. It's not taking me. I got the actual job done. It's taken me a year later to document it than it should have. I was outputting videos like every 3 or 4 weeks, and I was realizing I was working and I was doing the editing, the videos. I was exhausted. And then job after COVID, I was doing it as a COVID project, so I had a bunch of time. Then work started coming back, and like, oh, I guess I should work or something. So then I had to do that, and then I had no time, And then I've got other projects going on. I've got my next project was building this mixing desk, and then now we're using it in a full production, and it's awesome. So yeah, if anyone's interested, you go to I'm building a Fairlight CMI. Either see it on my channel or you see it on Cintar's channel.
Well, I'll link to your channel whenever this goes up.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
I'll leave links.
Here's the thing, though. They started it like my first episode was like 12 minutes. Then the next one was 6 minutes. Then the next one was 24 minutes. Then the next one was an hour. Then the next one was an hour. Then the next one was an hour. I'm like, so each of them is taking like, they're each an hour, and they're all like a 15-to-1 ratio. Because I've got literally like 40, 50 hours of footage still to go through.
Right.
Because I was recording everything. Like you're seeing it warts and all. Because when I started the project, I had no idea what it was doing. It was this mythical, weird machine that that basically they not abandoned, but their business model changed from using Fairlight CMI, which was a sampler, to then it was the first sampler sequencer workstation, the first digital audio workstation in the world, to then going to using they went into the multi-track world of doing multi-track recorders. So from that, they at that time, they still had the CMI architecture. So there's this brief window that these very, very expensive machines were put into these boxes that didn't look like Fairlight CMIs. They looked like something totally different, but the guts and the architecture were this. And through a lot of shenanigans and rewiring and jiggery pokery, you can actually make the old 24-track recorder machine believe it is a CMI and actually respond to MIDI and do things. And so that was my COVID project. I had a year and I rebuilt a machine and got it working. And then I even rebuilt the front panel. This isn't it. This is a loaner from the guy who designed it, called Steve Rance.
Wow.
Who has helped me at every single juncture. He's become a good friend now. He's one of the guys that designed a lot of the hardware and the software. I think, both actually, on the Fairlight, as long as there's a bunch of other people that I know on the Fairlight scene now too, that have helped me along the way. But since then, I've just been, documenting it, but it just takes so long to edit an hour because I'm including everything, all the failures. And so a lot of it is in fast forward mode, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's got to be done, hasn't it, to make it better for the viewer. But yeah. I understand the pain of going through footage and editing it and what have you. So.
Especially when some Scottish guy doesn't stop talking for an hour.
Yeah, well, I'll have to edit this down to 10 minutes. Yeah,
good stuff. That's a challenge. Right?
That's ideal. Jokes aside, ideal scenario for me is just to let people go, and that's perfect. But yeah, absolutely great talking to you. Huge fan of Worms, still play it.
Great stuff.
Great to talk to anyone involved.
Yeah, we had great fun making it. I was surrounded by the most amazing people. I was let in the door by some really talented, it was, as I said, it was Marcus Martin and John Allardyce. Marcus Brown, Marcus Dyson, and John Allardyce that opened the door for me to come in, and I was welcomed by everyone there. We all had little things that we added into it, but Andy Davidson had that thing kind of, really dialed in by the time I got there. It was such a bustling time. I'll tell you one final anecdote. When we were at a situation where they couldn't get them into the stores fast enough, and I can't remember if it was Worms 1 or Worms 2, and it was Christmas time, and we couldn't make enough boxes that it was actually in 3rd position in the charts, I believe. And I was up, it was Christmas time, and I was up at my girlfriend's parents' house at Christmas time. And it was winter, and it was all snowy. And I heard kids playing Worms outside. They were like, grenade! And throwing stuff. And they're like, I'll get you you, and doing all that. I'm like, holy moly, we're now a part of the culture. And that was a moment I was like, okay, we've gone into a thing that's gonna, it's a thing, and I didn't realize at that time, but that when it was, and then there was another time when I was in London and I was at some exhibit for something, and a very cute girl came up and asked for my autograph because she saw me in Amiga format or something. I was like, oh, I've arrived.
Nice.
And I was like, I was total nerdy girl. Well, she wasn't nerdy, but it's like funny. She's like, can I get your autograph? I'm like, yeah. And I didn't say, oh no, of course not. No, I went, yes, of course you can, my dear. I went straight and leaned into the role, and it was Amiga Power, I think, or Amiga Form. I can't remember. I think it was Amiga Power. No, it wasn't. It wasn't Amiga Power. Then there was all the whole Amiga Power thing, which is its whole story. But
yes,
I'm sure you know about.
I do.
Yeah. Fun and games.
So did you see any of that
literally
coming?
Fun and games.
Yeah. Did you see?
Yeah, we did see it coming. We were in it, and we're like, why? But why? A lot of us were like, can't we just get along? Why? This is that, and we didn't really feel it until we really saw some of the reviews, and so we're like, okay, you can't please all the people all the time. And I wasn't, I think when I was that age, I was a lot more of a hothead as well, for sure. And I think all of us were, but I didn't understand. I think the Amiga Power thing was happening way before I got there. It was, and then I remember when they did this thing of giving it like a 97% review on and then, thinking we'd fall for it. And I can't actually really remember all the details. I think I've kind of pushed that a little bit away because it was kind of negative. And, it was kind of like, is that really, do we have people that don't like us? Everyone seems to like us.
Yeah, and it seemed it was a bit childish, really, wasn't it? So
yeah, and we had friends that people that there was people that were at Signosis, and there's people that went Signo, people at Gremlin, Sensible, all that. No, there was none of that. We were just different people, different. There's that guy that works there. That's fine. There was no anger towards any of them. So seeing it come from a magazine felt really like, all right. There's some personal crap going on. I think the fact that everyone in the industry was so young that it allowed that kind of crap to continue on a personal level for something that's a published magazine, that kind of just showed how young we all were.
Yeah. Well, you live and learn.
Yeah, we do. Or we live and make the same mistakes continually.
Yes, indeed.